As a person with a strong Jewish identity, it has been hard to see so much anti-Semitism in the news and media in recent years. But anti-Semitism isn't a new thing. It has been around in many forms for over 2,000 years. Naftali Taubenfeld is a Holocaust survivor, meaning he experienced the most anti-Semitic event in history. This is his story, explained by his daughter Jane Taubenfeld Cohen, who teaches about the Holocaust and heads up a foundation called We Will Never Forget Holocaust Programs. Naftali was born in 1929 in a town called Radymno in Poland. He grew up Orthodox Jewish just like the whole of Radymno. In 1939, the Nazis invaded Radymno, but the Taubenfelds were able to escape because the peasants of Radymno warned them of the horrible things that would come to them if they did not flee. So, they packed up and walked some kilometers into the Soviet Union, but they weren't safe. The Soviets were against the Nazis, but they were still against the Jews. Once they entered, they were given a choice: give up your religion or be sentenced to the labor camps. They refused to give up their religion and were sent by train to a Siberian labor camp.
When they got into Russia, it was called USSR then, they wouldn't give up their religion, so they were sent to a camp by a very long train ride. A lot of Jews, including Menachem Begin, he became a prime minister of Israel. A lot of Jews that thought they were escaping into Russia were then taken prisoner in Russia. They woke up very, very early. They were forced to go out into the cold woods and do stuff like chop wood and chop down trees and get sap from trees and all kinds of other work. And they did that all day. For all three meals, they had what he called, it was soup. He said it was warm water with, he would say, one noodle chasing another. Very little noodles in it and very little chicken in it. So it was very thin. And they were all very much very, very thin by the time the war was over. And the reason they survived once they were in the camp is because my grandmother got a job in the kitchen so she could get them a little bit more food, because they tried to starve them and everything there. And a lot of people died. And when they got to this camp, the commander of the camp pointed to a cemetery and said, "That's where you'll all be pretty soon." So they knew what the stakes were. They knew that, they were lucky to be alive at the end of the war.
The Taubenfelds were freed from the labor camps in 1945 when the war ended. They tried to return to their hometown of Radymno, but the Poles refused to give up their land and killed Naftali's aunt. They were treated and checked into a displaced person camp where they would stay until 1949. In the camp, the Taubenfelds made friends with the soldiers, who then helped them get visas to the US.
They came to this country December 25th, 1949. And it was really like, they were very lucky. My father wanted to go to Israel, not to come here. He was young at that time. In 1949, he was only, 21 years old. He wanted to go to Israel, but his father didn't want the family to go from one war to another, so they came to the United States. The very first night that my father was in this country, somebody called him a dirty Jew, and my father punched him and ended up in jail for the night. My father made money in the DP camps so that all the family had some starting money when they got here, and they went into a small fruit business because the idea was that people, no matter what happens, people always need fruit. And so they earned a living doing that. My father eventually went into the wholesale fruit business, but his father had a small fruit store. That he went from being this very wealthy, my grandfather, landowner, and he sold burlap bags and did all kinds of things, and was a farmer and had property in different places, to having a small fruit store in the Bronx.
Naftali married an American and restarted his life in the US. Now, the Taubenfelds have a big family, all thanks to his bravery. The horrible event that was the Holocaust wouldn't have happened without Hitler's rabid anti-Semitism, And this same anti-Semitism continues today in neo-Nazist groups, anti-Semitic social media posts, and the news. And it's up to the descendants of those that experienced anti-Semitism to continue the fight to eradicate it.
Believe it or not, some days I go on to Twitter, or to X, it's called now, and I respond to all the anti-Semitic things that are on there.
There's a common misbelief amongst black and brown people, and I know this from growing up, and I've heard it and I've listened to it, that Jewish people are just like any other white race. You know, like it's just you mix them up with the rest of the majority, and you don't understand that they're a minority as well. And we need to understand that Jewish people deal with the same amount of hate and similar hardships and hard times. I'm not trying to get emotional right now, but I want to preach to the black and brown community that we need to uplift them and put our arms around them just as much. When we talk about the Black Lives Matter and we talk about elevating ourselves, we can't do that while stepping on the back of other people to elevate ourselves. And that's very, very important to me, and it should be important to everyone.
We're at a danger point, I'm sorry to say.
It is remarkable to hear you say that what you're seeing happening now, you've never seen in your entire lifetime.
Never seen it. The hatred and bigotry and anti-Semitism, to see people out in the Midwest carrying signs with swastikas, wearing bandanas and carrying guns, and making rude and bad comments towards Jewish people. This is the United States of America.
50% of students say they have experienced some discrimination because they are Jewish. This is also happening alongside anti-Muslim, Arab, and Sikh discrimination. The creation of the other and the dehumanization of any group based on their differences are the foundations of fascism. It's an old playbook, but it's been dusted off and being widely distributed today. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And I am increasingly alarmed that we may be condemned to repeat history, to once again have to fight for the very right to be Jewish.